Right, and knowing fully well that children form 50% of our population, just what critical role do they play in elections, and particularly this elections, knowing fully well that they do not actively participate in the voting process, and just what can institutions as well as stakeholders do to ensure protection of children now, during, and even after the elections? These are some of the issues that we are set to interrogate at this hour with my guest. That is Leonard Chumo, who is Early Child Development Policy Specialist. Karibu sana to the program, Leonard.
Thank you very much, Doreen.
Now, even before you go to the issues, I mean, 5 days to elections, what is your general assessment in terms of where we are right now, and even as you look at the preparedness in respect to these elections?
Thank you. I mean, I think the conversation around children doesn't always find itself to the center of elections and electioneering period, and so I'm really excited that KBC is putting a spotlight on issues around children. We have a responsibility as a society and as a nation to ensure that our children are safe, they're healthy, they get access to nutrition and information as well. And so, as we move very close to election, there must be modalities, framework, and processes that we put in place to ensure that, children are, safe. Before elections, we should talk a lot about, how do the voices of children come to the table? How do we factor in needs and aspirations and wishes of children into the agenda of elections? And then when we get into elections, we can think about how to ensure that they are safe, they have access to good information, and then post-election we can discuss about that. So as a nation, like you rightly say, people don't get to know that we have 50% of this nation is children. We'll
come to that, to the issues as we momentarily continue the conversation, but I just want to get your general feel and assessment, particularly in terms of preparedness. I mean, there's a lot of conversations ongoing around, coming from stakeholders, from institutions, and even just from Kenyans at large. So in your own analysis, do you feel we are ready to go come next week Tuesday?
I think we're ready. Everybody is nervous, but there can be no better time being a Kenyan, than now. Some people, are thinking of traveling, leaving the country, but we need to be proud of our country. I think all systems go. I feel more than ever we are set as a country to go into elections. All institutions seem prepared. You guys in the media, seem ready. And I think let's make it the best election that we've ever had. And, so I'm happy that we can even think about what about children? What about the voices that are not heard?
So you feel we are ready to go? August 9th it is. Okay, now going back to those figures and statistics, I mean, just looking at the general population, we say that children account of half of this. I mean, 50%. And as you rightly put, that this information may not be out there. People may not even be thinking that actually children form a bigger chunk of this. But the question that is out there is, much as they form a big chunk of the population, we know fully well they are not actively involved in the election process because, I mean, under the age of 18, you can't vote. It's within the Constitution. So then what critical role do they play in elections?
So, world over, children, do not participate directly in elections.
Yes.
But, countries are beginning to find ways that voices of children, come to find their way into the agenda of elections. In our country here, we have the county children forums, we have, children assemblies. And I hold the opinion that somehow we need to get the voices of children to count in elections. And I'm involved in research, with a few other people that are thinking about, why shouldn't children actually vote? What is the reason why children do not really vote? Is it because of age? Is it because they do not have an opinion? Is it because they do not matter? Now, when we're talking about 50%, actually it's not 50, it's about 53, 54.
So the number has increased over time.
The accurate figure is about 53, 54.
Okay.
And, so if you're talking about a country whose half of the population do not raise issues that count in an election period that will last for 5 years. There's a problem. So children have agendas, they have interests, they need to know how to cross the road. So let me touch something that is very current. Professor Makoha, who I think I like his work, announced that schools were closing yesterday. He announced on Monday. You don't do that in a country with 50% young children. Education needs to begin to be an important thing in this country, where no one just wakes up and says, schools will close tomorrow. We have children who go to school in Kilifi, they come from Busia, and vice versa. When you close school like that, how do they get there? And it's not even practical that you'll open schools on 11th, because literally that means that on 10th they need to be on the way traveling back to school. It's not possible. So I think, and the reason I'm saying that is elections is not an accident. It's not an emergency. We planned for 5 years. You guys in the media held a presidential election and you announced the next presidential, what do you call it, debate. And you announced the next presidential debate will be on, you even gave a date in 2027. Why should we not be able in education sector say schools will be closed on this and this date in 2027? We need to plan. So I think we need to start engaging, being realistic, have smart objectives for children, and bring their voices to the election as well. Yeah.
So basically what you're saying is that much as they may not be active players because they are ideally passive, they are not going to be there, casting a ballot because of the age factor, as you mentioned. But what I'm getting from you is that they also are key players in essence, that they also need to be involved. Let them also know why things are happening the way they are, not just ambush. Is that what I'm getting from you?
Yes, actually from child protection angle, and our constitution, 2010 Article 53, articulates very, very rightly. The president just signed an act, July, I think 12th of this year.
It was July 6th.
Yes, Children's Act 2022. And it says very clearly that children have a right of information. They need to know what's going on. And again, when you close schools, they need to know why. You have parents out there whose children are asking them, when we open schools, am I moving to the next class? Because they think maybe a term is over, we're moving to the next one. They have a right to unbiased information. They need to know what is presidential candidate Wajakoya, Raila, Ruto, and Wahiga about. Who are they? They are Kenyans. They have ideas and they would like to lead the country. Very unbiased, and even though they do not participate, they need to know what's going on. And every 5 years we have elections. What is an election? We get to choose a leader who leads our country, who champions the needs of the poor, the needs of children with disability, the needs of children like you, and so on. So we need to give that information to them. And in the best case scenario, and in the coming years, we need to begin early, and IEBC needs to be involved as well. Begin early to gather, views and information from children. How would they like, their schools look like? How would they like, their teaching programs to look like? School feeding, child protection. What are the issues that need to be captured in the manifestos of the politicians and put very squarely at the center? So yes, they're passive, but it's up to us adults. We have a responsibility to channel their views, their aspirations, and squarely put them into what we, run for 5 years.
All right, well put. Yeah. And even as talk about the forums, I just remember that also last month, I think it was about July 1st, UNICEF organized a forum with various stakeholders where children were presenting some of their issues to a good number of these leaders. And just from that particular forum, there was some raft of 6 issues that also UNICEF presented forth, citing that the state needs to look into these issues, and whichever faction takes office at the end of the day, they also need to look at these issues. So I just want us to look at some of those issues very quickly, because key among them represented was matters to do with social protection, end of violence against children. There was health as well as education. And even before we get to the issues, I just want to understand from your perspective, why are these particular issues very important? Because you know fully well there are quite a number of issues. So why do you feel these ones were really picked? Why are they pertinent?
So there are a number of international conventions that Kenya is party to, and so we are required as a player within a global framework to safeguard the rights of children. The 1989 UN Convention on the Right of the Child. We have the African Charter on the Welfare of the Child. Now we have our own constitution. Then we have the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals.
Yeah.
What we call the point twos of SDGs. 1.2, 2.2, 3.2, 4.2, all that. Squarely talks about what we need to do as a nation in order to fulfill, the goals of sustainable development goals, and also to be compliant with national, regional, and global conventions. So the issues of health, for instance, the reduction of poverty, ending violence, the cases of violence at home, and we're talking about violence. We really, really, really hope that as a nation, we will be decent, we will be civil, and the elections that are coming up will be peaceful. I echo the words of the former press secretary of the late President Moi, who said, politicians are political, they're cousins. I think he said something like that. So vote and go home. Of course they're telling...
they're always friends at the end of the day.
Yeah, at the end of the day. Of course they're telling you vote and stay there to watch for the election, the votes. But the point really is let's vote and be decent, wait for results, go back to work. But there could be violence, in sports here, and violence does not mean physical. It could be the words that we're moving around in social media, the videos that are doing rounds, and so on. There is violence in the community, domestic violence, because of poverty, divorce, and all those things. We need to ensure that children are safe. And as a country, we cannot... there is a statement in the Nurturing Care Framework, which is a framework by a global framework for action for children that was developed by UNICEF, WHO, World Bank, and other like-minded global organization, and was launched in Geneva, May of 2018 at the assembly there. One statement says that a nation, one of the easiest way a nation can achieve equity and get out of poverty and have development is by investing in children. So when we talk about focusing on health, nutrition, quality education, we're actually saying that we want our country to get out of poverty, to have equity, to have the things that the politicians are calling national aspirations. We can achieve them through children. And so I really want to commend bodies like UNICEF, civil society organizations, the Department of Children's Services, the Ministry of Gender, and others, and even the President. I think they're beginning to focus on, yes, we have youth in universities, colleges, we have women and youth, but we have children, which form the next generation, the next generation of voters, the next crop of leaders. The CBC outlines very clearly on what we would like a patriot to look like. And that's what we're saying. Let's focus on children.
So we are saying that these other issues are that they are equally important, but this one become, more pertinent because they are also key in the development of a child's life. That's what you're looking at. Let's stick on that violence beat just for a while, because again, also when you look at the research that was conducted by the University of Nairobi on the post-election violence, their focus was actually on the socio-economic aspect, and they looked at different areas, particularly, the peri-urban areas, on the effects of the PEV as at that time. Let's just look at the long-term effects of this, because again, children and women are always at the center of it. And also looking at that research, which indicated that at least above 500 children were affected, and this is out of the over 1,000 people that are affected in that post-election violence. What is the long-term effect of such on children, particularly?
Yeah, thanks, Doreen, that you bring that back. We've always been told that Kenyans are great people because they forget easily. Good thing, but can also be a bad thing. So we're not going back to 2007. Yes, definitely, as a country, and I hope everyone is committing to not going there. But better be prepared and not have it than not prepared and get there. So the statistics of 2007 were very revealing. That children, about 40% of the casualties of the violence were children. Yeah. And so,
which is a significant number.
Very, very significant. And children are not necessarily partisan. So they happen to be casualties of things that sometimes they do not know. And the effects are far-reaching, because we're talking about people who lost lives, but there are people who lost livelihoods, they lost parents, they had to move to different communities, and that creates trauma, post-traumatic stress disorders, loss of education. And I was thinking about the 2007, now we have 15-year-old children, that it would be very interesting to study what are their perception about unity, patriotism, and nationalism. So as a country,
and elections as well.
And elections, would they grow up to be voters? If they see violence, maybe not. So I think we need to begin to be conscious of what children are seeing, what they are hearing, because they will replicate, they will reflect what we do and who we are, what we say in political rallies, how we conduct ourselves on the election day. Let me remind us that elections will be happening in schools, by the way. Yeah. And in future, I think I would like to incite schools to ensure that IBC pays them rent for using their facilities.
Polling centers.
Yeah, so we need to be decent, because those are children's places, spaces. They need to see decency. Let's conduct ourselves properly and go home. What we share on social media, they have long-term effect. Children are like sponges. They take in what they see from the environment, and the effects will be long-term. They will live to reflect that. If we do good, they will be great citizens of our country.
And against why we keep advocating for peace in every chance you get. Avoid the mayhem, the poor bad messaging on the socials, because just as you're saying, it has a long-term effect. I mean, talked about those that are born at that time, they are what, around 15 years old as at that time. So you can imagine if they're thinking, I will never vote, then this in a way castigates their right in that regard. So it's important to ensure even what we put out there. Okay, going back to the law that was assented by the president on July 6th, that is the Children's Bill, and right now it's actually a law, has a raft of issues in there, including the children's right. Talk about the right to various forms of freedom, basic needs, and all of that. And one may just say that children have a better, or they could be having a good understanding of what their rights are, but they do not have an understanding of what really election means. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I mean, we've come far as a country. The 2022 Children's Act is not perfect, but we've come really far as a country. And many countries, in the region, and interestingly, globally, look up to Kenya, as a model. So we are setting the pace for other countries, for other societies, and we are case study for best practices. So, the law, articulates very elaborately on what the responsibilities of institutions, persons, families, all stakeholders, government ministries, and so on, towards enhancing, protecting, and implementation of children's rights. And I think one of my excitement is how it attempts to implement all the 1989 UN Convention on the Right of the Child, 12 articles. The right to information, freedom, association, education, health, all those things. Now, when it comes to information, it's our responsibility. We have an advantage to educate the younger, generation, but it has to be a two-way. We also need to listen to children. The way they communicate is not the way we do. Their language is different.
Yeah.
There is even a way right now they're asking questions about elections, but they do not ask, using English or Kiswahili. They might ask, using, facial expression, using drawings, the way you can see them reacting to crowds or when they see things on TV and things like that. So we need to listen. And I really urge, the population, parents especially, the community, political leaders, to think about children, even as we, emotionally get connected to politicians. Let's think about children. On the election day, when you leave home to go and vote, is your child safe? Who are you leaving your child with? Are you explaining to them what you're going to do? Do they have food to eat? As we watch the TV, are we cautious on the material being, shown on TV? And I appeal to the media to think about children even as they broadcast, censure some content, or warn viewers, the messages that politicians say sometimes is not good material for children. So, let's inform them, and most importantly, unbiased information. Let's give them information. They do not need to make choices, but they need to know what's going on. Yeah.
I mean, when you talk about informing, ensuring that the knowledge is passed out there, this responsibility lies squarely with whom? Because also, when you look at children, I mean, their perception largely when it comes to elections or politics, so to speak, it is shaped from their parents, from guardians. So who squarely lies with this responsibility of passing information to children?
So everyone. Everyone.
It's a holistic kind of effort.
Everyone. In fact, I refer to the Nurturing Care framework, and you can go to nurturingcare.org and look at that. It's a five-year framework for all nations, and it talks about all community, all society, all government. So we're talking all systems. And I think the president used those terms in unveiling, the Children's Act recently. Yeah. That it's a responsibility of everyone. Civil society, families. Of course, it starts from home, but we're talking about all children. Some of them are not in homes. Some are in charitable children institutions. Some are in conflict with the law. Others are in foster care. So everyone, where the child is, the public, the community, politicians, religious leaders, everyone, we have a responsibility to, one, protect them from abuse, violence, exploitation. We're likely going to see those things emerging because the attention of the society is now focused in one direction. Yeah. And so the evils that could easily be perpetuated against children, distribution of campaign materials or messages, or even people who are looking for numbers can easily recruit primary school kids to fill the stadiums and things like that, so they look like they have numbers. So they could easily, they are vulnerable, and this situation makes them a lot more vulnerable. Children with disability, children who cannot hear, the deaf. How do we ensure that, we are protecting them? So it's everybody's right, drivers on the road, schools, Right now, everyone is complaining, professor closed schools suddenly. They don't have fees, but teachers cannot just close schools and care nothing about where children go. It's their responsibility. They need to know that children arrive home well. If they come from Turkana and they study in Nairobi, it's the teacher's responsibility together with parents to ensure that they are safe home. So I guess I'm saying is it's everyone's responsibility. It's
everyone's responsibility. And I mean, Leonard, I just like to get a practical, so to speak, example of this protection, because as you've mentioned, children right now are at home, and that is possibly going to continue up until 10th, at least going by the ministry's directive. But how then do you protect children? Like, for instance, just was it yesterday or 2 days back, when we had leaflets circulating in some parts of the country propagating hate speech kind of messaging, but at least as of yesterday, know that the ministry, through the police, arrested 8 suspects out of that particular issue. So children are in that space. These leaflets are circulating, they're propagating hate speech kind of message, and a parent is wondering, so how then do I protect my children from this? Because this is something that you may not really have control over at the end of the day, but also they have to be protected. Yes.
I would, I think my opinion, I would encourage that we become aware that children are human beings. They have emotions. They have desire to know. They hear, they listen, they have all the senses. Let's not assume that, 2-year-old child, 5-year-old, they don't care, they don't know, they don't need to know. Let's begin from there. And when we talk about rights of children, we're not saying that, children are against adults. We're just saying that if we become the right influencers for children, our society actually becomes better. So right of information, what information can I share with my child? In what ways can I share with them? For example, it's simple to say, during an election period, we elect a president, and they do not even know what to elect. We get grown-ups like me and you get to choose a president who leads us for 5 years, and they lead us by coming up with policies. They build the roads, they build schools, and that's what's going on right now. So we are closing schools so that some of the schools can be used for that exercise in a simple way that is broken down, again, unbiased, but it begins from knowing that they need to know. Sometimes they actually want to know. Let's not brush them off, when you put on
they're not important.
You put on a TV and the first person that shows up there is talking about something, then you shout and say, go out.
Already you've built perception to that
go out, say, okay, something bad is happening. And children like what they are told not to see or not to watch. But, we can explain to them why we think it's not right material for them. It's graphic, or it's adult information and things like that. So there are very practical ways. And the assumption, of course, is that parents are at home, which again is not very true. There are families that will not even be breaking for holiday. They must go out and get food. So children are alone at home. That's why it has to be a whole society, whole government, everybody's business. In our neighborhoods, when children are playing, let's allow them to play. If they have to stop, because of commotion and things like that, let's put them back into safe places. And the Act, the 2022 Act, actually prescribes what needs to be done. Reporting, for instance. 112 is a toll-free number anyone can call, including parents and children. And I'd like to, there might be children watching this show, that if you're in a situation that you're sensing danger, abuse, or exploitation, ask your parents or a friend for a phone and dial 116, and you'll have people who are friendly. It's toll free. They'll talk to you. They'll find out where you are, what circumstances you are in, and that can even be your own parents. Because sometimes children are in danger of their own, parents and relatives. So I think there are ways we can practically help children to be safe, and I'm not talking just for this election period. They're more vulnerable now because attention is focused elsewhere, and there will be other, idlers around, drug addicts and drunkards who might take advantage of that. So it's a high risk area. Time for now, but these are things that need to be seen across, the year, across the 5 years. We need to safeguard children, report cases of abuse, and help them to thrive and succeed. Yeah.
Well said. And that's like on the ground when they're out there and they're perhaps detecting some form of violence. They can dial. The number is what?
116.
116.
Yeah. But they can call police as well. 999.
Yes.
And I think 112.
Okay.
But 116 is a special helpline for children matters.
Well said. Well said. That is on that part. On the social platform, then how do you navigate this? It's a free space. We say that we are a democratic space, and freedom of speech is also enshrined in our constitution. Just the other time, NCIC was saying that we need to close Facebook, at least for this moment, but the ministry came and ravaged that and said that we are a free state. So then how do you curb such? There's just so much you can control that is going on the online space.
Yeah.
How do you go about this one?
Yeah, that's an emotive conversation, especially 5 days to election.
Yeah.
And we've seen
because a good number of these children, around 15, 16, they have phones.
They have, and they are on social media as well. And parents and caregivers are generous to hand them their phones, and so we probably the act really talks about protection of children, including on materials, internet, and from sources, varied sources of
this is the
abuse.
Children's Act.
Yes. But in terms of practice, again, I think we need to do more to educate, caregivers, adults, and the society that we have a collective responsibility. What we share, what we pass on, what we load and upload, can get into anyone. And so I think it's important for caregivers, adults to know what children are watching, what children are accessing.
More like monitor?
Mostly they use their gadgets and so on, but for children who are older, teenagers, you have to embrace dialogue. You have to talk about these things, just like we talk about sex education, election, education, and let's hope that in the coming, days, we can bring some of these elements even into the curriculum, so that it's not one of those dark spaces that we should never talk about. Violence happens. We need to talk about it. How can children stay away from violence? How can children stay away from abuse? What are you likely to get on social media? Let's prepare them. What do you do if you see content that is not appropriate? And what is content that is not appropriate? So I think we need to, where you can limit access to inappropriate content, do that. Where you anticipate that your authority or opportunities to limit access to inappropriate content, and then embrace dialogue, discuss with children, and let them know why they need to take their own responsibility. And what we're talking about also targets children themselves, because they need to take their own protection as their own responsibility as well. They need to know who to talk to if they sense danger. They need to know what content is not appropriate and why. They need to know if their escalation of environment that might eventually lead to either violence or things like that. So we can educate, and it needs to begin also in schools. And I think, Professor Makoha, I think he's a great minister. Hopefully he becomes a minister again. Maybe 1 week to election, we need to say schools will only focus on teaching elections. What is election? What do people do? What should we expect? How can we promote peace as children and so on.
Okay, I hear you. And as we begin to wind down, Leonard, I know you've just mentioned it a bit even as you're responding to that earlier question, but I'd like you to elucidate it further and perhaps make it make more sense. You talked about 1 week to elections, but shouldn't we have this perhaps in the lessons, that it's part of the curriculum, part of the classes, that let's just understand what election means, what does voting means, what is voting patterns, what is your role as a child, what does your parents' perception play on all of this? Do you think we need to be having that as we wind down the conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, as a country, I hope every Kenyan is proud of our country, and we have one country. We've made great strides, in curriculum development, in reforms in education, and there's still a lot to be done, definitely, teacher training, employment, all those things, but. I think CBC provides one unique opportunity that we can utilize to engender values, and it talks a lot about values, and be very current. We've now known that election in this country is a very, very important thing. People campaign for 5 years; they never get tired. So we need to talk about it. Children need to know, if they pass by Nya Stadium or Uhuru Park and there's a large crowd that doing election, what is that? So I do agree with you. We need to incorporate elements of, and there's some there. Those of us who went to school a long time ago, we used to do civic education.
Yes.
And some of it is there, but I think it's not sufficient. We can do more, educate and empower children to know, to make right decisions, because it takes very short time before they become voters as well. And if we do not prepare them, we have actually prepared to fail. So I'm excited. But first, let's go and vote peacefully. I think we need to begin there.
Yes.
If we have this conversation 2 weeks from now, we can talk about what we need to do in the curriculum. But for now, let's ensure that children are safe. To IEBC, when we have pregnant mothers coming to vote, let's give them priority. If there are parents who cannot leave children to anyone and they have to bring them to the polling station, let's give them priority. Let's conduct ourselves decently. And those of us at home, let's explain what's going on to parents in a way that to children, in a way that they can understand. But let's be peaceful.
Well said, and a good place to end it. Those are also some very good recommendations from you, at least when it touches on that aspect of peace. It is very important. As you mentioned, elections will come and go, but the country will remain you and I at the end of the day. Good place to end it, and asante sana for your time, Leonard.
Thank
just
you,
coming
pleasure.
and explaining to us, making it make more sense as to why children are necessary and important and play a critical role when it comes to elections.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right. That has been Leonard Chumo, Early Child Development Policy Specialist. Of course, he's talking to us about child protection amid this election period and the critical role that children play when it comes to election. Good place to end the conversation and good place to end Good Morning Kenya this Wednesday morning. Asante sana on behalf of the entire team. Thank you so much, and let's do this again tomorrow.